In my circle of friends, I've always been universally acknowledged as that person, the drama queen, the kind who comes with her own imaginary soundtrack, who insists on turning everyday life into a full-blown movie wherever she goes. I'm a late-stage case of main character syndrome, and I've never exactly tried to hide it. So when I mailed out that stack of exquisitely designed black and gold cards to the friends I've known since we were literally in diapers together, I can't say I didn't see their reactions coming. Chloe was the first to respond. "Are you serious right now? Can you please calm down for once?" Morgan followed, colder and more efficient as always. "Don't bother me before the end of this quarter. I don't have time for your gothic role-playing games." Ben, predictably, went in the opposite direction. "Ha ha ha. You're a genius." Thumbs up emoji. And then, silence. Ellipses. Nothing else. Not a single one of them believed that I was actually dying. Had my credibility really collapsed this badly? Was my personal credit score so completely trashed that even terminal illness sounded like another one of my stunts? I sat there on the hospital bed, staring at the blinding white wall across from me, and spent a solid 2 seconds reflecting on that question. Eventually, I decided the problem had to be the invitations themselves. They were just too convincing, or maybe too stylish. They looked less like a real farewell and more like an entry pass to some immersive murder mystery experience. To be fair, the idea had only come to me a couple of days earlier. Thick black cardstock, gold-foiled edges, and a single line of text stamped in the center. March 17th. You are invited to Annie's farewell party. Chloe, my #1 childhood friend, received hers and immediately sent me a voice message, exhaustion dripping from every word. What new prank is this? If you're trying to pull some kind of living funeral performance art, just stop. It's bad luck. It's creepy. Honestly, it's a little disturbing. I fired back without hesitation. I forwarded her a viral TikTok video, some influencer hosting a pre-death goodbye party, and tried to explain myself. I know it sounds insane, but I'm serious. I want to hold my own funeral. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Chloe finally asked, quietly, why? I hesitated, just for a moment, and decided this was as good a time as any to tell the truth. I want one last chance to go completely wild with you guys before I die. Her response came fast and flat. Sweetheart. Go take a nap. Please stop messing around. And then she hung up on me. Excuse me? I'm dying, and you just hang up? Oh my God, Chloe, you heartless monster. I literally gave you my crown at the 7th grade dance when it was supposed to be mine. I proceeded to lose my mind in the chat window, firing off message after message in a full emotional spiral. Chloe replied with nothing but icy silence. Right on cue, Morgan chimed in. Childhood friend #2. A law firm partner living in a luxury high-rise in Manhattan, somehow even colder than Chloe. His message read like an automated reply, busy with an M&A deal. No time for this. As for Ben, childhood friend #3, the eternal overgrown kid, he was missing the point entirely. Ha 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 ha, classic you, he wrote. The idiot genuinely thought I was filming some kind of prank show. Fine. If that's how it was going to be, then fine. I decided that before I died, I would give the world one last spectacular reason to remember me as the person who always blew things up. I've always been a doer. Ever since I was a kid, action came before hesitation. My friends like to say that I only have 2 modes, not doing it at all, or doing it in the most outrageously extra way possible. When I was 17, after our high school graduation prom, there was a moment just before dawn. Chloe and I stood in the empty parking lot, staring up at the night sky washed pale by city lights. She sighed casually and said, "Light pollution's gotten so bad. You can't even see the stars anymore." All it took was that one sentence. Even though I was still wearing the velvet gown from prom, not yet changed, I could jump straight into the driver's seat without hesitation. Then why don't we go to the canyon right now and look at the stars? And just like that, under my relentless manic persuasion, 4 barely licensed teenagers piled into a borrowed, beat-up Ford and tore down the highway for more than 3 hours straight. By the time we finally clawed our way up to a lookout on a mountain at the edge of the suburbs, the night was already thinning out. The horizon in the distance was beginning to blush with that pale pre-dawn gray. Everyone was still half in shock, blinking into the cold air. Wrapped in an ill-fitting suit jacket, Ben asked in his usual clueless golden retriever tone, "Annie, it's basically morning. Where are the stars?" I sat cross-legged on the hood of the car and beamed, answering a completely different question. Perfect. No stars, but we get to watch the sunrise. All four of them fell into collective silence. Later, as the sun spilled over the mountains in a dramatic wash of gold and pink, Chloe stood there shivering, staring at the view, and cursed me under her breath. Annie, you're insane. Sometimes I think so too. I've always been like this, one impulsive thought, and suddenly I need to turn it into a full-scale production, loud and impossible to ignore. So once I decided I was going to throw myself a funeral, I didn't waste a second. The first thing on the list was my portrait. Not a memorial photo really, if we're being honest, more like an official image for a celebration. I went to the salon to get my hair handled, then headed straight to the best photography studio in the city, freshly cleaned up and feeling oddly light. Ma'am, are you sure you want to shoot it like this? The photographer asked hesitantly from behind the camera. Yes. Exactly like this. I ran a hand over my smooth, shaved head and flashed the lens a wide, shameless grin, all teeth and zero regrets. First time going bald. Might as well make it memorable. He couldn't help laughing as he pressed the shutter, then asked what size I wanted the photo printed. It's going on the welcome stand at the party. What do you think works best? Oh, and I don't want black and white. I want color. I want it to look like I'm about to walk a red carpet. His hands actually shook a little around the camera. He lowered it, looked at my bare head, then at my pale face, still painted with bright red lipstick, and something finally clicked. His lips parted. After a long pause, he managed a smile that was both professional and unexpectedly gentle. This might be the most beautiful photo I've ever taken. I gave him a thumbs up in full agreement. That was the whole point of this look. I wanted to stun people. As long as the weather held on party day, with that ruthless California sunlight hitting the photo just right, I'd glow like a disco ball. Once the shoot wrapped, I immediately booked a meeting with one of the most well-known event planning companies in the area. The funeral, or farewell party, was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Plenty of time to lock down the venue and the setup. I came prepared, practically dumping my Pinterest inspiration board onto the planner's desk. I want it outdoors. Ideally a private estate with a vineyard or a lake view. The lighting has to be good, Instagram good. Technically it's a funeral, but the vibe should lean closer to Coachella or a full-on Great Gatsby fantasy. Champagne towers, elegant hors d'oeuvres, a massive sign-in wall, none of that is optional. And most importantly, it has to feel happy. When people walk in, I want jazz or funk playing. Not some organ music that makes everyone want to cry. If I was going to say goodbye, I was going to do it my way, loud, radiant, and unforgettable. The planner clutched her tablet like a life raft, carefully typing out every one of my demands. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She looked up, adjusted her glasses, and asked, her voice deliberately professional but clearly strained, I'm sorry, I just need to confirm something. The deceased. The person being commemorated at this event. Who would that be? I smiled and pointed at myself. Me. Annie. The polite, customer service smile on her face froze instantly. For a split second, her expression hovered somewhere between I've just met a lunatic and I've just met a ghost. I know this sounds a little supernatural, I said lightly, noticing her hands starting to tremble. But don't worry. I'm still very much alive, for now. I tried to reassure her with a half-joke. And don't stress about the budget. I can't take the money with me anyway. Might as well turn it into a spectacular firework while I still can. The young woman across from me swallowed hard. Her voice shook when she asked, You look so young. How old are you? I proudly held up 5 fingers, like a trophy. 25. Pretty impressive, right? Hey, don't cry. Sometimes the world is unexpectedly kind. When the head of the planning company heard my story, she offered to waive the venue rental fee altogether. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I refused, insisting on paying according to the contract. I didn't want my funeral turning into some kind of charity fundraiser. Before I left, I made one last request, a little embarrassed. Could you also help me design a more formal digital invitation? Something like what you'd see for a gallery opening. By the time I finished handling all these after-I'm-gone arrangements and made it back to the hospital, it was already evening. I had just settled into my bed, ready to sleep, when the group chat, the one with only the 5 of us, suddenly lit up with a new message. Chloe tagged me directly. Where have you disappeared to this time? Did you run off to some national park with no signal again? Before I could type a reply, Ben jumped in too. Seriously, Annie. Your Instagram's been completely dead. Ever since that wilderness photo series of yours won the award, you've been acting all mysterious. What, you get famous and forget about your old friends now? The two of them went back and forth in the chat, half complaining, half joking, eventually accusing me of not even coming home for Thanksgiving. I stared at the screen, feeling both amused and strangely sore inside. Out loud, they were convinced my invitation was just another tasteless joke. But somewhere deeper, they were unsettled by the fact that they couldn't reach me. That was why they were testing the waters in the group chat, fishing for a response. Out of pure spite, I stayed silent. Not a single word. After all, they used to complain non-stop about how I talked too much in that very same chat. After college, everyone got busy learning how to be functional cogs in society. The kind of closeness where we FaceTimed every day slowly unraveled. I was the exception. Armed with the flexible life of a freelance photographer, I drop into the chat now and then, posting landscape shots from Iceland or the deserts of Utah. Back then, Chloe and Ben would groan in unison. Annie, enough already. Stop posting these envy-inducing photos. I'm stuck working overtime at the office. A year ago, when I won that International Photography Award, I suggested we all get together and celebrate. But Morgan was buried in due diligence for an acquisition. Ben was on a business trip. Chloe was busy with bridesmaid fittings for a wedding. Everyone had somewhere else to be. And just like that, the reunion never happened. When we were kids, we used to complain that our neighborhood was too small. You couldn't turn a corner without running into someone you knew. Growing up, we turned into stars scattered across a map, each fixed to a different coordinate. Without realizing it, even though we were still in the same group chat, we were now separated by thousands of miles, by time zones, by completely different lives. And yet, strangely, I was grateful for that distance. Because on the very day that reunion fell apart, I got my diagnosis. Cancer. Late stage. At least they weren't there. At least no one had to see me collapse in on myself. Lost in thought, my fingers drifted on their own, opening the group's member list. My eyes slid downward, past familiar names, until they stopped at the very bottom, on a profile picture that was nothing but darkness. My fourth childhood friend. The star that had drifted the farthest. The quietest one of all. We hadn't seen each other in years. As I was thinking about him, my phone suddenly vibrated. An incoming call lit up the screen, completely unexpected, carrying the weight of a time zone jump from the East Coast. Caller ID, Lucas. I have 4 childhood friends. 3 of them and I go all the way back to the age of diapers, when we were all just kids playing in the same neighborhood park, covered in dirt and grass stains. Lucas was the exception, the late arrival. When he was 6, he moved in next door with his father. A textbook single-parent household. His dad worked rotating shifts as a blue-collar laborer and was rarely home. My mom, an Irish woman with an oversized heart, noticed that the kid was always eating cold sandwiches by himself. She started calling him over, insisting he join us for hot bowls of beef stew. Naturally, I dragged him straight into our little group. But Lucas never quite fit in with the rest of us feral kids. He was always clean, shirts neatly pressed, buttons fastened all the way to the top. He did everything by the rules. He hated games that involved mud, scraped knees, or chaos, and he barely talked. At first Ben, still very much unfinished as a human being back then, complained to me. Why do you keep bringing him? He's like a robot. He's not cool at all. I patiently explained it to the idiot. You don't get it. With a good kid like him around, adults are way more willing to let us go out and play. He's our human shield. And he's got the best temper. Just watch. To prove how good-tempered Lucas was, I crouched low and tiptoed up behind him, planning to yell and scare him out of his skin. But just as my head leaned in close, he must have heard something. Lucas turned around suddenly. The distance was too small. My lips collided directly with his cheek. My first kiss, if you could even call it that, disappeared just like that, in the most ridiculous way possible. What I got in return was the group's absolute loyalty to Lucas. Ben and Chloe stared at him in awe. Oh my God. His temper is insane, they whispered. Annie basically assaulted him and he didn't even get mad. I've always suspected Lucas did it on purpose. That he heard my footsteps long before I got that close, and waited until the very last second to turn around. After all, even as a kid, he was sharper than anyone else. Annie. His voice came through the phone, low and steady, threaded with a faint electrical hiss. It sounded older than I remembered. More grounded. And underneath it, a trace of hesitation. I just received a very strange letter, he said quietly. Did you send it? It should have been early morning in New York. Lucas probably received the overnight invitation the moment he woke up. Drugged and heavy with side effects, I was barely conscious. I let out a vague hum into the phone. Hum. On the other end, his breathing visibly stalled, just for a beat. Annie. Don't joke like this, he said. This isn't funny. I actually wanted to tease him a little more, throw out a clever line or two, see if this piece of driftwood from Wall Street had developed even a trace of humor after all these years. But once your body deteriorates past a certain point, the pull of sleep becomes something you can't really fight. I'm not joking. I forced my eyes open, battling the weight dragging them shut, and said it as simply as possible. Lucas. I'm dying. The line went dead silent. No breathing. No static. Nothing at all. A long stretch passed. My thoughts blurred. My breaths grew slow and deep. If you don't say something, I'm hanging up and going back to sleep. I muttered it lazily. I didn't wait for his answer. The phone slipped out of my hand, and I sank completely into sleep. In the very last second before my consciousness disappeared, I thought I heard someone desperately calling my name, shaking, careful, as if afraid a single wrong sound might shatter something fragile. When I woke up the next morning, my phone was dead, powered off. After I plugged it in and rebooted it, I saw the call log from last night. Duration, 2 hours and 14 minutes. Which meant that after I fell asleep, Lucas never hung up. He stayed on the line, listening to my breathing, for more than 2 hours. I didn't know what to make of that. And honestly, I didn't have the energy to think about it. Nurse Brenda came in to change my medication and promptly scolded me like I was a delinquent child. Apparently, word had gotten out that I'd snuck out of my room to meet an event planner. Sweetheart, your white blood cell count is terrifyingly low, she lectured while adjusting the 4-drip. If you keep wandering around like this, I'm going to have to strap you to the bed. I soothed her the way I always did, calling her my favorite Brenda and laying on the charm until she finally left. The moment the door closed, an email from the planning company landed in my inbox. They'd sent over several venue options. One of them was a private vineyard tucked into the Malibu Hills, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It was perfect. I replied immediately to lock it in and finalized the run of show for the day. Around noon, the planner sent me 3 fully designed versions of the digital invitation. Let me know if any of these speak to you. If not, our design team can stay late and revise. Ever since they found out this was for my own funeral, everyone there spoke to me like I was a porcelain doll, gentle, careful, painfully soft. To make good use of their efficiency, I forwarded all 3 invitations directly into our 5-person group chat. I added a note. Hey, can you help me pick one? Really hope you'll all come to my party. The responses came almost instantly. The chat exploded. Morgan. Ben. Chloe. Then Chloe followed up immediately. Annie, what is all this? One layer after another, what are you actually trying to do? This isn't funny at all. If this is some kind of Halloween warm-up, you've taken it way too far. It's genuinely scary. Sigh. Classic boy who cried wolf karma. Half a year ago, right before I went skydiving in Barcelona, I'd spiraled a little in the group chat while trying to get over my fear of heights. I'd said something dramatic like, if this were my last day, that wouldn't be so bad. It terrified them. Someone almost called the police. Ever since then, my credibility with them had basically dropped to 0. Still, as I scrolled through the messages one by one, I noticed something immediately. There was nothing from Lucas. I'm sorry. This time it's real. I typed the sentence into the chat box, took a deep breath, and hit send, along with an image. It was a pathology report from Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, plus my real-time hospital location. The chat froze. It was like someone had pressed pause on the entire conversation. No one said a word. Even Ben, the guy who replied to everything with emojis, went completely silent. I leaned back against the hospital bed and stared out the window at California's brutally bright sunlight. Out of nowhere, a line from Borges drifted into my mind: when someone dies, it's like water disappearing into water. My gaze slowly went empty. I don't know how much time passed. Minutes. Hours. I couldn't tell. Then suddenly, the hospital room door was shoved open with force. And with it came a voice so familiar it made my chest ache. Annie. I hadn't expected this. The first person to appear at my bedside, looking like he'd been dragged straight out of a storm, was Lucas. New York to Los Angeles is nearly a 6-hour flight, not counting the time difference. Which meant that the moment our call ended last night, he probably hadn't even packed a bag before heading straight for JFK. I stared at him, stunned. His shirt was wrinkled beyond saving. His tie was gone. A shadow of stubble darkened his jaw. The eyes that used to be so controlled, so unreadable, were now bloodshot and raw. He stared back at me. At my bare head. At the tubes in my arms. At the sharp angles of my face, thinned down to something unrecognizable. Annie. He took one step forward. Then another. Each one looked like it hurt, like he was walking across broken glass. His expression was unbearable, as if he were enduring actual physical pain. I tried to lighten the suffocating air with a weak smile. Hey. Long time no see. Lucas cut me off, eyes burning red. Annie. Come to New York with me. I froze again. New York? For what? Broadway. I tried to joke. I don't think my body's up for that long of a flight right now. He rushed to my bedside, leaned over me, bracing his hands on either side of my body. His voice was hoarse, like he'd swallowed ash. I've already contacted a specialist at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Best oncology department in the country. There's a new clinical trial. We can leave tonight. I'll arrange a medical jet. It wasn't a proposal anymore. It was a plea. I understood exactly what he was doing. He was trying to use everything he'd earned on Wall Street, every connection, every dollar, to buy me a chance at survival. I sighed. Then gently but firmly I said, Lucas, the doctors already told me. At this stage, quality of life matters more than treatment. I don't want to spend whatever time I have left tangled in tubes and machines. I looked at him and finished the sentence softly. I want to stay here. Stop. He shouted the word, then immediately realized how out of control he sounded. He squeezed his eyes shut, pain carving deep lines into his face. Please, Annie. Don't give up. Hey, no crying, I tried to joke weakly. You're supposed to be the calmest one out of all of us. I reached out, aiming to poke his cheek while it was right there in front of me. Before my finger could land, he grabbed my hand hard and folded it into his palm. His hand was ice cold. A single, burning tear dropped onto the back of my hand. It was so hot it made me flinch. Lucas leaned forward, his forehead pressing down, his face buried against my palm. Annie, he said, his voice breaking, I'm not as strong as you think. I know. I've always known. Lucas, the aloof one, the polished one, the guy who moved through life like a perfectly programmed elite machine, was actually a coward at heart. When we were 17, during the winter of senior year, his world collapsed overnight. His father was dragged into a massive financial fraud case. Bankruptcy followed. Then the threat of prison. One day his house was just sealed. Yellow tape on the door. Gone. That was when his mother appeared. An elite East Coast lawyer who had never once shown her face before. She won custody without a fight and delivered her verdict with surgical coldness. If he wanted to go to college, if he wanted any chance of paying off the debts, he had to go with her. To New York. To a world he didn't know at all. We never found out what happened in those days in between. We only knew the result. Lucas was transferring schools before midterms. Leaving. The night before he left, he climbed up the fire escape outside my bedroom and knocked on my window. That boy who always kept his shirts crisply ironed looked like a soaked stray dog under the rain. Annie, I don't want to go, he whispered, holding me tight, his face buried in the hollow of my neck. His voice was shaking. I don't want to go to New York. I don't want to become like her. I'm scared. I spent the whole night talking him through it. Breaking it down. telling him this was the only way forward. I'd convinced him back then. But now, no matter what I said, it didn't work. The 17-year-old boy and the 25-year-old man were both breaking apart right in front of me. Ugh, my head hurts, I groaned, pulling out my last resort weapon and whining dramatically. Lucas stiffened instantly. He jerked his head up, eyes red and panicked, reaching for the call button. Where? How bad? I'll get the doctor. Lying, I admitted guiltily, turning my gaze away. And that was when I accidentally locked eyes with someone else at the doorway. Morgan stood there, silent. Dressed in a perfectly tailored high-end suit, still holding that absurdly expensive Hermes Birkin bag in her hand. I had no idea how long she'd been standing there. When our eyes met, her whole body jolted. The woman who slaughtered opponents at negotiation tables for a living looked at me on that hospital bed, and the light in her eyes shattered. Morgan, I started, surprised and relieved all at once. She clapped a hand over her mouth like she'd just seen something unspeakable. Then she turned and ran. Her heels struck the marble floor in a messy, frantic rhythm, the most undignified moment of her entire life. She's probably hiding in the bathroom crying right now, I said quietly. You know how much she hates anyone seeing her makeup ruined. I tried to signal for Lucas to let go of my hand, but his grip only tightened, like if he loosened it even a little, I'd disappear. I sighed, helpless. Every last one of them, such crybabies. Before I could even push Lucas away, Chloe and Ben burst in one after the other. Chloe reached the bed, her legs gave out, and she dropped straight to her knees on the floor. She didn't say a single word. Tears poured out of her like a dam breaking, soaking through the carefully styled bohemian dress she'd chosen for the day. Ben came in last. Normally he was all easy smiles, that big golden retriever kind of guy who never seemed to take anything seriously. But now he looked like a child who knew he'd done something terribly wrong. He stood there awkwardly, hands hanging uselessly at his sides, choking back tears again and again, until all he managed to squeeze out was a painfully stupid sentence. Annie, how did you get so small? For some reason, that one stupid line made my nose sting. No. This wouldn't do. I was the one with the main character aura. I was supposed to be the one who smiled all the way to the end of the party. I couldn't let their emotions knock me off course. I took a deep breath, pressed a hand to my head, and let out an exaggerated groan. Stop. If you keep crying like this, my head's going to explode. But this time, it wasn't acting. Without warning, a violent wave of pain crashed over me, swallowing everything in an instant. My consciousness was wiped clean. In the blink of an eye, I fell into endless darkness. What is death? When I was 16, I'd been half asleep in history class when a counselor pulled me out into the hallway. She held my hands and told me my parents had been involved in a chain reaction car crash on the 405 freeway. Standing under the harsh white lights of the ER, I faced that question for the first time. Back then I believed death was fast, an abrupt, merciless break. Like a sudden blackout with no warning. That belief lasted until a year ago. Until the day I received my diagnosis. That afternoon, Lucas called me. Over the phone he said, Annie, I'm back in Los Angeles. I came specifically to celebrate your photography award. He'd been back a few times in previous years, Thanksgiving, Christmas, but through some cruel combination of timing and chance, we'd always just missed each other. That time was different. I knew unmistakably that we were under the same city sky, breathing the same fogged air. And I lied to him. I looked out at the streets of West Hollywood through my window and said casually, bad timing. I'm in Positano right now. The limoncello here is incredible. I might stay the whole summer. There was a long silence on the line. Behind it, I could hear the chaos of airport announcements. Then he asked quietly, when are you coming back? No matter how long it takes, I'll wait for you. Okay. I swallowed the pain from the biopsy I'd just undergone and answered in a deliberately careless, joking tone. How long can you really wait? Doesn't Wall Street need saving? What about your hedge fund, or whatever it is you run? Lucas replied almost instantly. There was no hesitation. Just a stubbornness I'd never heard before. Annie, however long you want me to wait, I'll wait. None of that matters. I'd always known that between Lucas and me, there was something thin and fragile, like a sheet of glass, or maybe a full decade of what-ifs. I thought that with enough time, with the distance between the East Coast and the West, the barrier would eventually weather away and disappear. But that day, Lucas reached out and unfolded it again. I lay there staring at the ceiling, tears sliding silently into my ears, and answered him in a voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to, Lucas. Go live your life." That was the day I finally understood. Death doesn't have to be sudden. It can be long, drawn out. The body becomes a battlefield, and the mind is locked in a slow, exhausting tug-of-war with the Reaper. Half a year ago, after my very first round of chemotherapy, the side effects wrecked me. I was in so much pain I could barely think straight. I bought a plane ticket to Barcelona and completely lost my mind in the group chat, ranting about wanting to go skydiving, joking that maybe I should just jump without a parachute and be done with it. The truth was, I wasn't joking at all. But Morgan soothed me the same way she always had since we were kids. "Annie, be good," she said gently. "Did you hit a creative block again? Just cry it out. Come back and I'll take you to that amazing brunch place." I cried all the way through the skydive. When I landed, I took a photo, me grinning like an idiot, and posted it on Instagram with the caption, "Living on the Edge." On Christmas Eve, Chloe complained to me over FaceTime. "How can you be this bad at time management? Everyone's home, and you're the only one still running around the world." I lied and told them I was in New Zealand, chasing the Southern Hemisphere's auroras. In reality, I was lying in a hospital bed just 6 miles from home, staring at the moonlight outside the window. In my head, I answered Chloe silently, "If you miss me that much, call a car and come get me. I'm right here, at the hospital on the corner." I kept lying to them, covering things up, using carefully edited photos and fake locations to throw them off. Because I knew, once I said it out loud, they'd drop everything. Their jobs, their plans, their lives. They'd come running. And I didn't want that. I wanted them to remember me at my prettiest. My most extra. Not like this, hooked up to tubes, a broken version of myself. Over this past year, I'd gotten used to pain. I honestly thought I'd grown a shell thick enough to face death like some stoic philosopher, calm and unflinching. But the moment I opened my eyes again and saw all 4 of them crammed into my hospital room, everything collapsed. "Annie," they called my name, one by one, crowding closer. The faces that were usually so polished and composed were now a mess, eyes swollen red like walnuts. Morgan was the worst of all. She'd cried so hard that half her false eyelashes were gone. For some reason, I laughed. I even felt a little proud. "So, now you're all willing to come to my party, huh? No one's too busy anymore." Only when I spoke did I realize how weak my voice sounded, thin as a mosquito. Ben almost started crying again, but he immediately ducked behind Chloe like a coward. They were all trying very consciously not to show their grief in front of me. Still, I could feel the pressure in the air, heavy and suffocating. Chloe bit her lip hard and spat out, furious, "Annie, you asshole." We'd fought 1,000 times growing up. Her insult vocabulary was still painfully limited. I ignored her and struggled to point at the bedside table. "Give me that." It was a few sheets of paper I'd printed ahead of time. "Getting into my party isn't that easy," I said weakly, waving them like a prize. "These are VIP passes. You have to sign an agreement first." It was my party code of conduct. 3 rules total, laid out like an official legal contract. Clause 1, absolute obedience to all arrangements made by the party planner, that's me. Clause 2, strict adherence to the dress code. Formal attire is mandatory. Clause 3, no crying allowed. Violators will be fined $1,000, donated to a stray cat foundation. Watching them sign their names with red, watery eyes, like they were signing away their souls, I smiled, completely satisfied. But I didn't get to smile for long. The body I'd forced to hold together for an entire year finally hit its limit. It was like a machine flashing its most violent shutdown warning, system failure imminent. Before I could even finish catching up with them, doctors rushed in, and I was wheeled away into yet another round of emergency treatment. After that, time dissolved. I slept through most of the days. But every time I managed to pry my eyes open, even just for a moment, they were always there, stationed by my bedside, exactly as they'd been before. As if time itself had politely paused for us. I muttered, half-dazed, "Don't you people have jobs? Morgan, did your law firm go bankrupt? Ben, Didn't your boss fire you yet? Chloe opened her mouth like she was about to curse me out, then swallowed it back down. Lucas pressed his lips together tightly, his gaze so deep it felt like staring into a well, unblinking, terrified, as if missing even 1 second of me meant I'd vanish. Morgan let out a choked sound and immediately turned toward the window, pretending to be fascinated by the view. So much for my dream of a glamorous, joyful farewell. If I can't even make it to the party. No. I had to make it. This was my final show. I was the lead. I wasn't allowed to be absent. The doctors and nurses did everything they could to buy me time. The event planning team went above and beyond, running on pure professionalism and goodwill. When the vineyard owner heard my story, he promised to hold the venue for me indefinitely, no matter how long it took. And I still hadn't properly said goodbye to my friends. Clinging to that thought, one day, against all logic, my willpower won again. Like the dramatic last flare you see in movies, I surfaced from the fog. My body wouldn't move, but I smiled at them, wide and bright. "All right, minions," I said hoarsely. "Let's begin." After a 5-day delay, Annie's farewell party finally opened. Wrapped in my favorite cashmere blanket, I sat in a wheelchair as a private nurse pushed me to the entrance of the vineyard lawn. Right in front of me stood an enormous sign-in wall made from thousands of fresh roses and hydrangeas. Neon lights spelled out the title in bold, glowing letters. Annie's Farewell Gala. Below it were handwritten names, one line after another. Signed, Chloe. Signed, Morgan. Signed, Ben. Signed, Lucas. We passed the extravagant wall and entered a dreamlike lawn filled with white balloons and flowers. There was no one there. I was still trying to process that when the massive outdoor movie screen at the center of the lawn suddenly lit up. Elegant text slowly appeared across it. Annie, the highlight reel. This was supposed to be the party's first segment. Originally, I'd planned to edit the video myself, a carefully curated masterpiece, turning me into a flawless goddess one last time. But my condition worsened, and I never got the chance. 2 days ago, during a brief lucid moment, I'd asked the planning company to cancel the segment entirely. Apparently, my friends had ignored me. They'd finished it for me. The screen filled with an image of a newborn, wrinkled, red, unmistakably me. Annie was born on a sunny California summer morning, the subtitle read. Her parents hoped her life would always be full of light, so they named her Annie. Then Chloe's voice came in as the narrator. Light. Warm. Smiling through the words. Annie was a born drama queen. At 2, she insisted on being the flower girl at weddings. By 4, she'd already crowned herself the ringleader of the entire neighborhood. The image cut, and a grainy home video flickered onto the screen. 4-year-old Annie appeared, her hair split into 2 messy pigtails, wearing a bright red puffer vest. She stood triumphantly on a large rock in the backyard, brandishing a tree branch like a sword. Below her was a crowd of tiny followers. She shouted at the top of her lungs, voice cracking with excitement. Crew members. The treasure is straight ahead. The legendary chocolate fountain. Charge. Little Ben was the first to run forward. He immediately tripped over the garden hose and face-planted into the grass, frozen between crying and not crying. First mate Ben. Tiny Annie declared with absolute authority. You stay here and ambush the enemy. You're our rear guard. She said it with such confidence that 5-year-old Ben solemnly accepted this honorable mission, nodding like a soldier. That afternoon, Ben lay behind those bushes for nearly an hour, until Chloe's mom, who had been filming, suddenly ran back and hauled him up by the collar. Oh my God, Ben, she laughed, we almost left you here to be eaten by mosquitoes. The second clip jumped forward in time, to a neighborhood barbecue when Annie was 6. The footage was shot on an old handheld DV camera, slightly shaky. Little Annie crouched low, moving like a sneaky kitten stalking prey, inching toward a boy sitting on the steps eating a popsicle. Lucas. At the last second, her foot slipped. She lunged forward, collided with his back, and her mouth landed squarely on his cheek. The moment was captured perfectly, because Annie's mom and Chloe's mom happened to walk by at exactly that second. Off camera, their shrieks and laughter exploded. She kissed him. Oh my God, she kissed him. We're saving this for their wedding video. The scene changed again. Now it was a middle school hallway, 12-year-old Annie standing in front of a locked janitor's closet, pointing at the door with an exhausted expression. Morgan got an A- on her history test, she explained to the camera. She thinks her life is over and she's hiding in there crying again. Morgan's mom asked from behind the camera, if she's hiding, then why are you still here? Annie puffed out her chest slightly, proud. I'm waiting for her to finish crying. When she comes out, I need to give her an Annie-style hug immediately. She nodded decisively. I'm really good at comforting people. If I take her to get that double chocolate sundae, she'll be totally fine. Guaranteed. The final clip appeared. High school. 15 years old. Spring track meet. Annie had lost a bet to a boy on the basketball team and, as punishment, was forced to sign up for the girls' 1,500-meter run. For someone whose athletic performance permanently hovered just above failing, it was pure torture. Right before the race started, Annie stood on the red rubber track, looking left and right, completely hopeless. The stands were loud, people cheering and heckling, but she couldn't find the familiar faces she was looking for. She dropped her head, bending down to check her shoelaces, trying to buy herself a few seconds of courage. Then she heard her name over the loudspeaker. She looked up. Against the light, she saw 4 figures running toward her from a distance. The California sun was blinding, flooding everything with gold. The 4 teenagers ran toward her, backlit, the breeze lifting their hair and the hems of their shirts. They were all wearing the same white t-shirts. Across their chests, written in thick black marker, were the words, Team Annie. Annie. Chloe waved wildly, shouting as she ran. Annie, we're here. We'll run with you. The shout, so bright, so full of youth, suddenly overlapped with a voice outside the screen. A real voice. I snapped my head to the side. The vineyard sat right up against the Pacific. The warm spring sun was sinking toward the horizon, spilling across the ocean and turning the entire world into a golden la-la land dream. In that glowing haze, Chloe and Morgan appeared in custom couture gowns, while Lucas and Ben wore perfectly tailored black tailcoats. They stood at the brightest point of the light. The 4 teenagers I remembered seemed to grow up in an instant. They stepped out of the screen, out of memory itself, crossing years and distance, walking straight toward me from that soft, awkward past. Backlit by the sun, eyes red but smiles forced into place, they said together, Annie, we're here. My chest burned, sharp and sour, like I'd swallowed an entire lemon whole. Still, I fought to lift my smile. No crying. Those were my rules. As the self-appointed party queen, I couldn't be the first one to break them. I sniffed hard and attacked first. You're late. According to party regulations, late arrivals have to drink as punishment. Lucas stepped forward and naturally took hold of my wheelchair, pushing me toward the long table. Chloe, unconvinced, lifted her skirt and rummaged through her expensive handbag, refusing to back down. Annie, you're the one who's late, she shot back. We've been waiting for you our entire lives. I shrugged and waved a hand magnanimously. Fine. I'll forgive you, considering how seriously you dressed for the occasion. Which means we move straight to the second segment. I smiled. I owe each of you one honest truth. The funeral, no, the party's second act, was called the confession booth. The rules were simple. Each person had to reveal one secret involving someone else at the table. The person involved was only allowed to listen, no judging, no arguing, no getting mad. Once everyone sat down at the long table draped in white linen, servers poured champagne into tall flutes. Ben raised his hand first. He loosened his bow tie and glanced nervously at Chloe. Chloe, do you remember that first edition, limited-run X-Men comic you thought you lost in 7th grade? He swallowed. It wasn't lost. I used it to prop up the wobbly leg of my gaming table. By the time I realized how damaged it was, I was too scared to tell you. Chloe shot him a murderous look. Her fingers tightened around the champagne glass, nearly crushing it. Instinctively, she inhaled, ready to unleash something starting with the letter F, then remembered the rules and forced it back down. She turned to Morgan. After a moment of hesitation, she spoke. Morgan. Senior year, at homecoming, when Brad from the football team suddenly ghosted you and stood you up. That was because I cornered him outside the locker room. I warned him that if he was just messing around, he should stay far away from you. She paused. I might have mentioned that your family owned guns. I know, Morgan said suddenly, smiling. There was relief in it. She looked back at Chloe. I didn't smash his locker because he ignored me. I did it because I overheard him bragging in the cafeteria, telling people you were the crazy girl chasing after him. Chloe froze. Her eyes instantly filled with red. I listened, grinning, watching these two women, absolute forces of nature in business and law, bare their hearts like schoolgirls. I deliberately tapped the table, feigning annoyance. Hey. How did this turn into your emotional reconciliation session? Don't you have any secrets about me? I want gossip too. Ben immediately jumped in, desperate to redirect attention away from the comic book. What could we possibly hide from you? You're Annie. Your intuition's sharper than the FBI. I was just about to let out a smug little hum. There is, Lucas said. His low voice cut cleanly through the moment. He sat across from me, hands folded neatly on the table, those deep-set eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made it impossible to look away. Annie, when we were 6, I was actually waiting for you to come closer. The sunlight cast your shadow on the ground, he continued, the corner of his mouth lifting into the faintest smile, as if he were slipping back into the body of that boy on the steps. I saw you a long time before you reached me. I was planning to turn around and scare you first. My lips curved instinctively. I was just about to tease him about how calculating he'd been, even back then. But Lucas didn't stop. His voice stayed steady as he kept peeling back truths that time had carefully buried. And a year ago, you told me you were in Positano. I told you I was flying back to New York the next day. He paused. I didn't leave. I stayed in Los Angeles for 7 full days. I sat every morning at the coffee shop downstairs from your apartment, thinking, just in case you suddenly came back and wanted an iced Americano. My breath hitched. And 2 years ago, Christmas Eve. That winter in New York had been brutally cold. Lucas hadn't been able to come back to California because his mother was in surgery. Late at night, still stuck at work, he'd called me to wish me a happy new year. I'd been out celebrating with friends at a bar, laughing as I told him, "Idiot, we have a 3-hour time difference. By your clock, it's not even New Year's countdown yet." There was a pause on the line back then. Just a few seconds. Then he'd said it, almost too quickly. I want to be in your time zone. I'd panicked. Before I could respond, he'd brushed it off, said he was drunk, talking nonsense, and hung up in a hurry. I wasn't drunk that night, Lucas said now, looking straight into my eyes, enunciating every word. That wasn't nonsense. And there's more. He kept moving backward through time, like a patient archaeologist brushing dust away layer by layer, uncovering fragments that still caught the light. It was as if he meant to lay every small hidden secret he'd ever carried about me onto the table, all at once. On the surface, I kept that soft, unbothered smile, the composed expression of the party queen. But under the blanket on my lap, my hand clenched the fabric of my dress so tightly my fingers ached. And when we were 17, Lucas went on quietly, the night we waited for the sunrise on that mountain. That night Ben, our resident chaos machine, couldn't stay still for a second, running around the summit chasing bugs. Morgan and Chloe were busy scouting angles, trying to capture silhouettes against the pre-dawn sky. Only Lucas and I stayed behind, sitting on the hood of the car, wrapped in the same blanket, waiting. I must have been exhausted. I leaned against his shoulder and dozed off for a bit. Half asleep, I told him to make sure he woke me before the sun came up. Before he did, Lucas leaned close and whispered something into my ear, so softly it barely disturbed the air. The sentence you pretended not to hear back then, he said now. His voice trembled slightly, but he didn't look away. It was, Annie, I like you. The wind in the Malibu Valley carried the damp breath of the Pacific, tangling with my heartbeat. For a split second, reflected in Lucas's dark brown eyes, I saw it, spring at 17, a world not yet worn down by life. The heat of that gaze burned. I closed my eyes. Annie, did you hear me? Lucas's voice was so light it sounded like a sigh, threaded with a faint, unguarded hoarseness. I opened my eyes, looked at him, and gave him the calm, effortless smile I was best at. I heard you. The truth was, I'd heard him back when we were 17. But standing at that fork in the road, you heading for an Ivy League future in New York, me staying behind at a California community college, I didn't have the courage to hold you back. So I chose to pretend I was asleep. Just like now. Standing on the boundary between life and death, I didn't have the right to answer you. So I chose to pretend I didn't care. Don't blame me, Lucas. The one who's leaving will always leave. And the ones who stay have to keep living. I met his gaze head-on and watched the light in his eyes slowly dim, until he finally lowered his head. In that moment, language itself felt useless. He said quietly. Then again, even softer, The party fell into a silence that felt almost fatal. Even the sound of the ocean breeze became sharp and unbearable. Morgan was the first to break it. She cleared her throat and shifted the conversation with visible effort. All right, Annie. Your turn. According to the rules, you owe us a secret. I spread my hands without the slightest guilt and immediately started cheating. You know me, I can't keep secrets. You've already exposed everything I have. I smiled. I'll substitute with truth. Ask me anything. Then I quickly raised one finger. One question only. I'm the party queen. I get privileges. Wow, Annie, that's stingy, Ben complained, trying to lighten the mood, though his voice was still thick with tears. I lifted my chin proudly. Can't help it. That's what you get when you're Annie. Morgan and Chloe exchanged a look. A long moment passed before Morgan finally spoke. The woman who never hesitated in a courtroom lowered her voice now, a tremor slipping through. Annie, do you regret anything? Do you have regrets? I met her watery eyes, then looked around at the other three faces, every one of them holding their breath. I smiled steady and sure, without a second of hesitation. I lived a full life. No FOMO. No unfinished bucket list. They all seemed to exhale at once. Shoulders sagged as the tension drained away. Chloe sniffed and muttered. Stop being so smug. My smile only grew wider, until the corners of my eyes turned wet. Then I looked at them seriously and said, the biggest flex of my life isn't winning photography awards. It's not how many countries I've been to. It's that I got to have 4 damn good friends. The third segment of the party was called Open Mic, Toasts and Roasts. The dead can't hear eulogies. So it made more sense to listen while I was still alive. This wasn't me saying goodbye to them, it was them saying goodbye to me. And as for why it was freestyle? Because this segment had been kept secret right up until now, a surprise. Or depending on how you looked at it, a jump scare. They were very clearly unprepared. Annie, don't do this to us. Chloe's face crumpled. Even the champagne flute in her hand was shaking. You're going to get better. You're sitting right here, alive, breathing. What are we supposed to mourn? This funeral, wrapped in Gatsby-style luxury, champagne towers and flowers, finally showed its cruelty at that moment. No matter how much glitter you layered on top, grief was the base color. You couldn't drown it out. Hey. You all signed a contract, I said, forcing my energy up, pitching my voice brighter than I felt, trying to drag the mood back from the edge. Anyone who breaks the rules gets a bill from my lawyer. Then I added quickly, if you really can't think of anything, you can always praise me. You know compliments are my love language. I can't, Chloe tried to resist. But Ben, who'd been silent with his head buried in his arms, suddenly stood up. If Annie wants to hear it, I'll say it. He grabbed the microphone from the table, so hard he nearly knocked over a glass. Chloe stared at him in shock. Ben. Ben's eyes were red. He took a deep breath, like someone walking toward an execution, and said slowly, deliberately, "Don't let Annie have regrets." I stared at him, stunned. For a split second this guy, usually glued to hoodies and video games, looked kind of heroic. He looked back at me. His lips moved. Annie. That was as far as he got. It was like his throat had been filled with cement. He wiped his face hard, trying to shove the tears back down, and forced the words out through shaking breath. Annie, you're the bravest person I've ever known. Ever since we were kids, I liked running behind you. Because as long as I was following you, I wasn't scared of the bigger kids. I wasn't scared of this stupid world. You're smart, you're funny, you're insane. I felt warm all over, already waiting for more. Then Ben completely fell apart. I can't keep lying, screw bravery, fuck this. He dropped the microphone, collapsed forward onto the white tablecloth, and sobbed. Full body, ugly crying. His shoulders shook violently. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry myself. But Ben's breakdown was like a signal flare. The dam burst. Annie, you know I'm bad with words, Chloe said next. I can't do the pretty speeches. She forced her mouth into a high, exaggerated smile, light sarcastic, the way she always looked when we gossiped over brunch. I just want you to be happy. I want every second you're alive to be party time. So I'm not going to cry. Look, my makeup is flawless. She said it like a joke. Her face was already streaked with tears. Mascara ran down her cheeks in dark, uneven lines. I regretted this segment instantly. This was torture. I was hurting my friends. But they didn't give me the chance to stop it. Don't you dare leave us like this. Morgan clenched her jaw, her voice sharp, the same tone she used to terrify opposing counsel in court. If you even think about abandoning us, I swear, every year on your birthday I'll buy you that cheap grocery store fruitcake you hate most. I'll put those tacky number candles on it. Every Christmas, I'll only send you gift cards, never real presents. Every year. She didn't even make it 2 sentences in. Her voice shattered in the wind, and she couldn't go on. Wow. That's brutal, I let out a weak laugh. You know I hate those preservative-packed grocery store cakes the most. Only then did the dizziness finally catch up with me. The world tilted. Those few short segments had burned through every last drop of adrenaline I had left. My body was done. My vision started to blur at the edges. Annie, let's go back to the hospital. Lucas's voice was right by my ear, careful to the point of reverence, like he was afraid of startling something fragile. Don't cheat. I leaned back into the wheelchair, blinking slowly, threatening him without any real force. It's your turn now. If you don't say something nice, I'm really going to fall asleep. Annie. Lucas cupped my face as my head slowly tipped to one side. His forehead rested gently against mine. I struggled to lift my heavy eyelids, and felt a single scorching tear fall onto my lashes. I flinched, just barely. When that tear dropped, it felt like a rainstorm breaking loose inside my chest. Annie. Lucas's voice was hoarse now, completely surrendered, murmuring into my ear. He wasn't reciting poetry, but every word he spoke sounded like a desperate love poem. I give you the loyalty of someone who has never believed in anything. I give you the core of myself that I've protected, the part that doesn't write to please the world, doesn't trade for profit, isn't touched by time or failure. I give you my interpretation of your life. My theory of you. Your real, astonishing existence. I give you my loneliness. My darkness. The hunger of my heart. I try to move you with confusion, with danger, with failure. His words floated into my ears, light as a lullaby from another dimension. My eyes closed slowly. My consciousness began to drift away, and somewhere in my fading thoughts, I laughed at him. Lucas, you sly bastard. Saving something this literary for the very end. Wasn't this Borges? Of course it was. That bookish kid who always sat in the corner of the library, still so old-fashioned. What was that poem called again? I couldn't remember. I only remembered the line, "With what can I hold you?" When I opened my eyes again, I was back in my bed at Cedars Sinai. Blinding white walls. The steady beeping of machines. Annie? Annie's awake. The same familiar faces crowded around me, all of them sporting enormous dark circles under their eyes. As soon as I regained consciousness, I couldn't help muttering. But the party isn't over yet. We still had my most anticipated segment, the DIY urn workshop. And the indie band I'd paid a fortune to book hadn't even played yet. They were my favorite band. They'd even agreed to cover Heroes. I hadn't heard a single song. The injustice hit me hard. And we didn't even take the final group selfie. We did, Morgan said hoarsely, handing me a glass of water. The drone was filming the whole time. The band played too. The lead singer recorded a message just for you. It's on the iPad. We'll play it when you feel a bit better. I brightened immediately. Still, my mouth went full Karen mode. That's still not perfect. I don't care. I'm filing a complaint. I want to throw the whole party again. Fine. We'll do it again. When you're better, we'll do it again in Vegas. Chloe held my hand and agreed to my unreasonable demands without hesitation. Being indulged felt amazing. As the medication pulled me gently under, I drifted off comfortably, mumbling one last instruction through the haze. Next time, you all have to write me messages. Just write. Friends forever. In the blink of an eye, summer arrived in Malibu. Annie's second funeral took place right on schedule. This time, there were no champagne towers. No neon sign in walls. Just hills covered in wildflowers and the steady wind rolling in from the Pacific. Ben was, unsurprisingly, still the one crying the hardest, tears and snot everywhere, dignity completely abandoned. Chloe wore dark sunglasses, fighting it with everything she had. She handed Ben a tissue with one hand and hissed at him under her breath. "Shut up, Ben." Annie said, "No crying. Don't make me punch you at a funeral." Morgan stood in front of the wreaths, inspecting the setup with the same critical eye she brought to boardrooms and courtrooms. "The hydrangeas are the wrong shade. They're a little wilted. And the forecast said it might be overcast today," she frowned. "Annie's photo is crooked. Move it 5 degrees to the left." Lucas stood a short distance away, motionless. He was wearing the black shirt Annie loved most. He stared at the headstone like a piece of driftwood washed ashore, as if he were waiting for that prank-loving girl to suddenly jump out from behind it and scare him. On the gravestone, Annie's photo shone brightly, her shaved head, her grin unapologetic and radiant. It was her official portrait. Below it, a single line was carved. The last playful remark Annie left to the world. Her epitaph. "See you later, friend." The end.